What I'm going to do in the coming 20 minutes is to take you through a period of over 30 years, from the past to the future, on infrastructure development in Hong Kong. Now, there are a lot of materials. I'm not sure what I can complete on time. The last time I did a similar presentation was to Lord Green when he visited Hong Kong in March this year. I failed to complete on time. So please give me some support when Steve tried to stop me. For those who may not be familiar with Hong Kong, Hong Kong here is south of Okay, Hong Kong is south of Shenzhen, which is a special economic region of China. Hong Kong is about 130 to 140 kilometers away from Guangzhou, which is the capital city of Guangdong province. Macau, which is another special administrative region of China, Macau is on our west. Now, Hong Kong is a very small place, a bit more than 1,000 square kilometers. It consists of Hong Kong Island, Lantau Island, which is the this computer is not really working. Okay. The Lantau Island is the largest island of Hong Kong. It is where the Hong Kong International Airport, the new airport, is located. Kowloon Peninsula and New Territories, and the boundary between Shenzhen and Hong Kong is the river, Shenzhen River. I'll make reference to the names of these places in my subsequent presentation. Now, this histogram shows you the capital works expenditure from the period between 1991 to beyond 2021. Hong Kong government is committed to a sustained infrastructure development program. Now, I would like to divide this histogram into 4 parts, as shown in different colors on the slide. And I'll briefly run through the major projects in each of these 4 periods. Now, the first period, which is from 1991 to 1997, just before Hong Kong is returned to China, this is what we call the airport core program era, when the old airport at Kowloon is moved. Well, I better don't move the arrows, the cursor. Okay, the Kowloon, when the old airport at Kowloon is moved to the new location in Lantau Island, which involve altogether 10 major projects, highway, railway, reclamation tunnels, costing about 12.4 billion pounds and completed within 7 to 8 years. Now, the second period is between 1998 to roughly 2006. That's after return of Hong Kong to China. So the focus of the major projects were integration with China, and there were 8 large-scale projects, including the one on the left-hand side of the slide, a highway bridge connecting the northwest New Territories of Hong Kong with Shenzhen, the Hong Kong-Shenzhen Western Corridor. And then, for a number of reasons, including downturn of the economy, the expenditure on capital works dropped noticeably near the end of the second period at around 2005-2006. So in order to sustain the long-term development of Hong Kong, the chief executive of Hong Kong government announced in his 2007 policy address 10 major projects, costing roughly 56 billion pounds. It will take around 20 years to complete all these 10 major projects. These 10 major projects can be divided into 3 groups, as shown on the slide: cross-border projects, 4 of them, domestic transportation projects, 3, and 3 other area development projects. And I'm going to roughly run through each of these projects with you. Now, for the cross-boundary projects, 4 of them costing roughly 23.4 billion pounds. The first one that I would like to talk about is the Guangzhou-Shenzhen-Hong Kong Express Rail Link. It is a railway project connecting city centers of Hong Kong, Shenzhen, and Guangzhou. Altogether 130 kilometers long. The section within the Hong Kong boundary is about 26 kilometers, all in tunnels, costing roughly 5.5 billion pounds. The terminus will be constructed in fact, it's being constructed in Kowloon, about 12 hectares in area. Upon completion, it will be the largest underground railway station in the world, with developments on top. Work commenced in 2009, just commenced in 2009. It will be completed in 2015. The second project that I would like to talk about is the Hong Kong-Zhuhai-Macau Bridge, connecting Hong Kong with Macau and another Chinese city, Zhuhai. 35 kilometers long. It is a highway project consisting of viaducts, bridges, and a section of deep-sea tunnel. The section within Guangdong waters are jointly funded by the 3 governments. It commenced work in 2009, but the section within the Hong Kong waters is still in detailed design stage. We hope to commence work sometime near end of this year or early next year. It will be completed in 2016. The third cross-boundary project is the Hong Kong-Shenzhen Western Express Line. It is another railway line connecting the Hong Kong New Airport with the Shenzhen Airport. It serves 2 purposes. The first one, obviously, is to enhance cooperation between the 2 airports, one strong international flight, the other one in domestic flight within China. The other purpose is to connect up 2 new development areas, one in Qianhai in Shenzhen, the other one in the northwest new territories of Hong Kong. About 45 kilometers long, the section within Hong Kong areas is estimated to cost something like 6 to 7 billion pounds. Technical feasibility study has just been completed. Hong Kong government and Shenzhen government are now looking into how we should take forward this railway project. The last cross-boundary project is the Lok Ma Chau Loop. It is a piece of land left behind after realigning the Shenzhen River, which I mentioned earlier, is the boundary between Shenzhen City and Hong Kong City. It will be jointly developed by Hong Kong government and Shenzhen government. Mr. Wilfred is going to talk about this project later on, so I won't go into details. Now, coming on to the domestic transportation projects, there are 3 of them costing roughly 10.7 billion Hong Kong dollars. The first one that I want to talk about is the Tritton section of South Island Line. Now, many parts of Hong Kong are now served by a mass transit railway, but this line is the first line extending into the southern part of Hong Kong Island. Is roughly 1 billion pounds estimated cost. Medium capacity railway line. It started work this year, and we're hoping to complete the work in 2016. The second domestic transportation project is also a railway line connecting the northeast new territory with the urban centers in Kowloon and Hong Kong Island. It's estimated to be around 6 to 7 billion pounds. It passes through areas which are not served by mass transit railway at the moment. It's in detailed design stage. We hope to commence work sometime next year, and will be completed in phases until 2020. The last transportation project is a highway project connecting Hong Kong-Zhuhai-Macau Bridge, the Hong Kong International Airport, development along the northern shore of Lantau Island, the northwest New Territories, and then ultimately to the cross-border bridge that I mentioned earlier, the Hong Kong-Shenzhen Western Corridor, to the western part of Shenzhen City. This is going to cost roughly about 2 to 3 billion pounds. It is in detailed design stage, and we hope to commence work sometime end of this year or early next year. And the completion date will tie in with the opening, the commissioning of the Hong Kong-Zhuhai-Macau Bridge, which is at around 2016. So it comes to area development projects. There are altogether 3 of them. The infrastructure supporting this development would roughly cost 23 billion pounds. The first project that I want to mention is the West Kowloon Cultural District, and I understand that one of the speakers will talk about this project later, Spencer de Grey, so I'll leave it to him to give you more details. The second area development project is the Kai Dept development, which is the location of the old airport. The airport has now been moved to Lantau Island. It is about 320 hectares in area. It will be developed into an integrated development. Again, my colleague Stephen will talk about this project, so I'll leave it to him to give you more details. The last development project consists of a number of new areas along the northern border of the new territories of Hong Kong to produce more land to accommodate our economic and population growth. At the moment, we are still in the public engagement exercise. And after completion of the public engagement exercise and all the necessary statutory procedures and finalizing the development plan, we hope to commence work in 2016 for the first population intake at around 2021. So this covers all the 10 major projects. But apart from the 10 major projects, there are over 160 projects of different nature and complexity for which we have allocated resources for them to go into detailed design and construction stage, costing altogether roughly 12.5 billion pounds that will be completed in around 5 to 6 years' time. Now, what is going to happen after completion of the 10 major projects? As I mentioned earlier, the Hong Kong government is committed to a sustainable development, infrastructure development program. Now, there are quite a number of major projects in the early planning stage, and I'd like to very briefly run through some of them with you. They may be divided into 4 groups: transportation projects, airport and port projects, again, area development projects, and lastly, the utility and services projects. Now, one of the 10 major projects I mentioned earlier is the new development areas along the northern border of new territories. But in order to support those newly developed areas, we need to improve the railway network at the northern part of NT, new territories. So there will be some railway projects. Now, along the northern shore of Hong Kong Island, economic activities will continue to grow at the business centers. So there will be a need to improve the mass transit railway network along the northern shore of the island. Now, I mentioned earlier that one of the 10 major projects is the eastern section of South Island Line. But as the western part of Hong Kong Island continue to grow, there will be a need to build the western section of South Island Line, which will undergo a more detailed feasibility study. Now, the western part of Shenzhen has been identified as a strategic growth area by Guangdong. So as economic activities increases, there will be a need for us to expand the highway network on the western part of Hong Kong, including, I'm sure that you have heard about Tsing Ma Bridge in Hong Kong, and which will become saturated sometime in 2020, So there may be a need to duplicate the Chiang Mai Bridge in the long term. Now, I'm sure that you have heard about expansion program for the Hong Kong International Airport. We have just completed a public engagement exercise. We are looking into different options, one of which is to construct a third runway for the airport. Now, in order to sustain the container freight industry, we are looking into the possibility or the need to build an additional container terminal number 10. After completion of the Hong Kong-Zhuhai-Macau Bridge, it would provide the infrastructure to support further development along the northern shore of Lantau Island. So there will be some development projects along the northern shore of Lantau Island. Now, reclamation in Hong Kong has been a problem. There is a piece of legislation in Hong Kong which came into effect in 1997, which prohibit reclamation within Victoria Harbour. And since then, reclamation in Hong Kong gradually came to a halt. But we need land for our further development. So we are now looking into reclamation outside Victoria Harbour at a number of strategic locations. So there will be some reclamation projects in the longer term. Land is scarce in Hong Kong, so we are looking into the potential of wider use of caverns. As shown on the slide, if we are able to move a sewage treatment plant, for instance, into a nearby caverns, so that we can release the land for more beneficial use, then that would be very useful for Hong Kong. So we are looking at 5 strategic areas for caverns development, putting some more offensive facilities into the caverns so that land can be released for more beneficial use. The better use of the closed down quarries, and then utilities. At the moment, over 70% of Hong Kong drinking water relies on a river in Guangdong. So there will be a need for us to identify alternative water resources such as seawater desalination, building desalination plants in Hong Kong. Landfill is a problem not only in Hong Kong but in many other parts of the world. Landfills in Hong Kong will soon fill up, so we need to look at the feasibility to develop new waste treatment facilities. So, as you can see, opportunities for UK construction sectors abound in Hong Kong. In the coming years to come, if you look at this graph, for the first 2 periods that I mentioned earlier, the maximum annual expenditure was around 30 billion Hong Kong dollars, which is about 2.4 billion pounds. But since 2007, after the announcement of 10 major projects, as you can see on the graph, the annual expenditure has climbed up rapidly. So in the coming years, at least in the coming 5 years, the annual expenditure, the maximum annual expenditure would be at a pretty high level, at around 4.8 billion pounds. Now, we do not only award contracts to contractors or consultants at the lowest price. We look at quality service. We look at creativity and innovation. I think these are the strengths of UK companies. There are a wide variety of jobs in Hong Kong. We manage an open and transparent system to manage our consultants and contractors. And also, business environment in Hong Kong is very friendly.
Having heard Mr. Wai's overall introduction of Hong Kong's infrastructure, we come into a smaller area. We zoom in to Kai Tak. Well, the 2 yellow patches are the new and old airports. The new airport, you probably know, if you go to Hong Kong, you land at Chek Lap Kok. Previously, before 1998, we landed at Kai Tak, the smaller patch. yellow patch over there, you can see that it is located at the heart of the city. It's surrounded by water. It's a very valuable piece of land. To compare, Kai Tak is 320 hectares, and Canary Wharf, located in Island of the Docks, is about 110 hectares. So Kai Tak is about 3 times the size of Canary Wharf. In terms of population, I think Canary Wharf is mainly working population, and in Kai Tak, the working population is more or less the same as Canary Wharf, about 90,000. But there is also a population of about 90,000 residential. The project cost, government is investing in infrastructure in Kai Tak is around £8 billion. So far, we have spent about 10 to 20%, about £1 billion so far. We have several major projects. Apart from the overall development, we have several major projects. The first that will come into existence will be the public housing and the cruise terminal building and its first berth. The public housing will be occupying about 40% of the population in the overall Kai Tak. Other major projects include, you see a blue line is a Kai Tak River. In fact, it's currently an open nullah. We are turning it into a better look, more pleasing water feature in the city. We are going to landscape it. And next to it, we have the Long Chun Stone Bridge Preservation Corridor. We discovered some historic remnants over there, which is well connected to the Kowloon Walled City, which was Chinese government's garrison at the time of British colonization. So we have some link here of the British with Chinese. And we have a major development. We are under planning multi-purpose stadium complex. Yesterday, we went to your Olympic Park, which is going to open in a year's time. It's really impressive. I think the skill there can be applied to our multi-purpose stadium complex. And we have a landscape deck. What is that? It's a 1.5 kilometer long landscape deck in the middle of the runway, connecting on one side residential development and on the other side commercial development, mainly hotels. And underneath that deck is vehicular road. We like to shield off the noise from those vehicles by this landscape deck. We always compare this feature like the High Line in New York. It's a very attractive linear landscape feature. So we hope that we can do something even better here in Kai Tak. And also, I think what UK companies can help is on our hospitals design and all those equipment supplies. And in fact, we are planning 3 major hospitals. I'll have more details later. For the cruise terminal, I think a lot of you know that it's designed by Lord Norman Foster, and it's under construction. And next time, if you go to Hong Kong, maybe you can consider riding the biggest ship to Hong Kong, landing on this cruise terminal building, which is to be commissioned in mid-2013, just less than 2 years from now. And also, around the same time, we have the public housing population intake in mid-2013. And that the cruise terminal building is costing us about £650 million, and the construction is now going well. For the stadium complex under planning as near to Olympic-sized stadium, with other facilities like the secondary stadium and indoor arena, is occupying 20 hectares in site. It's not a small site. And the overall cost, I think, it should be over £1.6 billion pounds. And tentatively, it is going to be completed in 2019. But we are still studying its feasibility and the procurement methods. For the hospitals, we are planning 3 major hospitals here, with the first to be constructed very not far from now. And we'll have the design and build tender next year, probably early next year. It will be occupying about 2.2 hectares in site, although we have only 470 beds, but those bedrooms are extra large to accommodate not only for the children, but probably their family in that hospital bedroom. And the completion is tentatively 2016. So from now on till the tender period, please consider whether your expertise can contribute. And even when it's being constructed, I think the services, equipment supply will be very contributing to this project. And there are other hospitals like the Center of Excellence in Neuroscience and a new acute hospital. Altogether, the expenditure will be over £1.6 billion. We have some environmental initiatives. One is being under study is the environmentally friendly linkage system. In our mind, it could be a monorail running several kilometers long, and the overall investment will be over £800 million, and tentatively the completion will be 2021. And we have a first district cooling system being built in Hong Kong, and it's mainly for non-domestic buildings use. The phase 1 completion will be in 2013 to tie in with the completion of the cruise terminal and other commercial facilities. The overall pipe for these coolants, water will be over 5 kilometers long, and the overall cost is £140 million. And this is the landscape deck that I have described. It's over 1.5 kilometers long, and the width is 17 meter wide. And the overall cost, £80 million. And actually, we are considering having an open design competition internationally. So watch out. We'll be announcing the details soon. The Kai Tak River is basically for flood prevention, and is an improvement upon the current open nala that runs through the city. And we are stopping all the illegal connections to this river, to this nala. And in addition to improving the flood prevention capability, we are on top, decorating it, providing landscape, providing facilities all along to this 2.4 kilometers long water feature. When completed, we think it will be a feature not only for Kai Tak, it will be a feature for Hong Kong too. And as I tell you, we discovered during our construction historic remnant of the Long Chun Stone Bridge. It was a pier taking the Chinese officials from the mainland to Hong Kong through this bridge or pier. So it is a very meaningful remnant for us. And we will be turning it into a preservation corridor with the length of it is about 250 meters long, width is over 30 meters. And for this one, we are also considering whether we should hold international design competition to ensure the best design quality here. After all, we are looking for your excellent services, and we look for excellent qualities in Kai Tak, and we have ample opportunities for UK companies in design, construction, equipment, and services supplies. Thank you. Actually, I finished with a 1-minute video for you. This is an animation of what will be completed in about 10 years' time. What you're looking at is a multi-purpose stadium complex To the north is commercial residential development. To the east, mainly residential. The two towers, the twin towers, will be commercial development. Next to it is hotel. In front of you is the public housing. And in Kai-Tak, we aim at a very green community with over 30% greenery to the whole site. That means among the 320 hectares of site, we are dedicating 100 hectares for open space. Let's see, in front of you is a cruise terminal. Thank you.
As explained by Mr. White, the Samjun River is the natural boundary between China and Hong Kong. To the north of the river is the city of Samjun, and to the south is Hong Kong. To regulate flooding and to improve navigation, the Samjun River was trained and realigned in the 90s. And with the completion of the Stage 1 Samjun Regulation Project in 1997, the Lok Ma Chau Loop was formed. An interesting question now arises. Should the Lok Ma Chau Loop continue to belong to Samjun, or should it now belong to Hong Kong? Well, as you understand, there have been many discussions and many suggestions on what to use with this land called Lok Ma Chau Loop. And the government of Hong Kong and the government of Samjun have agreed to jointly develop the land. Based on a series of public engagement and consultation exercise in 2008, it was considered that the leading land use for the Lok Ma Chau Loop should be for higher education. The reason being is that we must enhance the human resource in the Pearl River Delta in order for southern China to take on the challenge of the future economy. The loop, therefore, will become the sustainable exchange zone of knowledge and technology, leveraging on one side Hong Kong's connection to the world, and on the other side the vast pool of resource from mainland China. Sorry. Okay. Okay, sorry about it. As the loop will be the first major land development undertaken by both governments together, this will involve cross-boundary cooperation and collaboration on a much broader scale and to a higher level in order for this to be successful, such as there has to be changes in the institutional arrangement on both sides and also changes to policy in order to support this development. We can have a physical boundary for separating China and Hong Kong, but actually there is no boundary for carbon dioxide emission. Therefore, the Lok Ma Chau Loop will be developed as the first low-carbon economy in the Pearl River Delta. This is also the first time that both governments have undertaken an integrated planning approach. As you can see here, the urban design of the Lok Ma Chau Loop has also taken into consideration the embracing hand principle, in which a lot of open space, ventilation corridor, and public amenities will be formed from north to south, resembling the fingers of the embracing hand of the two cities. Within the 87 hectares of land with Lok Ma Chau, 710,000 square meters of building space will be reserved for higher education. 410,000 meters square will be reserved for research and development, innovative and creative and cultural industry. On the land adjoining this North Machao Loop on the Hong Kong side, 182 hectares of land will provide the infrastructure and facility to support the development of the loop. But mainly, the natural setting and the rich ecological resource within this 182 hectares of land will be preserved and protected. On the Shenzhen side, as you see on the right-hand side, the adjoining area, 167 hectares, which is now mainly residential development, and one of the most busiest land, what we call boundary control point, which is to facilitate the movement of goods between China and Hong Kong, with some 20,000 container trucks moving back and forth through this boundary control point nowadays. In the long term, as explained by Mr. White earlier, this boundary control point might be relocated to the east. With the relocation of this boundary control point, there are opportunities on the Shenzhen side to redevelop this boundary control point to provide supporting services such as entertainment, retail and office facility, and also accommodation for the development of the loop. Though the carbon dioxide emission for Hong Kong and China are low compared to US and Europe, the total emission of China have now actually surpassed US and Western Europe. Therefore, reduction and regulation of carbon dioxide emission will become the major driver for land development in China and Hong Kong. Prior to the Copenhagen summit in December 2009, China has announced to the world that she will reduce her carbon intensity. And reduction of carbon intensity by 40% to 45% have now actually been written into China's 12 five-year plan. This is a very ambitious and challenging target. Therefore, all developments within the 12 five-year plan period must look seriously into reducing carbon dioxide in the development. What this means and what this translates into, this carbon agenda have generated further business opportunity for service provider and solution providers from outside of China and Hong Kong. In particular, some of the soft skills like legal advice, advice on institutional arrangement during the planning and design stage, services from solution provider in system integration, system operation during the implementation and operating stage. Some of the opportunity in the infrastructure sector I would highlight in the following section. For the energy sector, in addition to service that you would expect, like provision of renewable energy, providing energy strategy to government and to big corporations, legal and institutional advice on how to hook up on-site renewable to the grid, etc., providing solution and equipment for district cooling plant and district cooling equipment is an area that I think UK providers should look seriously into because of the subtropical climate in Hong Kong and southern China. In addition to the district cooling plant that Mr. Stephen have mentioned just now in Kai Tak, there will be 2 more district cooling plants in Lok Ma Chau Loop. And another one will be built also in what we call the new development area, NDA, that was explained by Mr. White. Last year, the manufacturing and sale of automobiles in China have surpassed that of North America and Western Europe. To sustain economic growth, China will not put a brake on the auto industry. And what this translates into is that reduction of carbon from the transport sector will be very important for the Chinese market, and this means business opportunities. For some of you who may have visited the Shanghai Expo last year, you will recall that the Expo was serviced by two types of electric bus. One run on electric battery, and the other one run on what they call superconductor. Actually, the superconductor bus have been running in China for 4 years on route number 11 in the city of Shanghai prior to the opening of the Expo. The central government of China has pledged to spend 100 billion renminbi, which translates to 9.8 billion pounds sterling using last week's exchange rate, to get 20 million green cars on the road by the year 2020. And they expected that at least 5 million of these 20 million green vehicles will be running on batteries. In addition, 27 cities in China, with 25 of them being selected by the central government of China as pilot city, will be purchasing electric bus to build an electric bus fleet. For each bus that they purchase, they will receive a subsidy of 500,000 renminbi from the central government. So what does all this statistic mean? What this means is, in the next 10 to 20 years, you can expect electric vehicle will become a major business in China. You can also say that for China now, there are 54 manufacturers of electric vehicle or hybrid vehicle, providing 190 models to the market. So actually China does not need any help in the research and development of electric vehicles. But if you look at it from the other side, to put all these vehicles, electric vehicles, on the road, you will need a lot of solutions and a lot of services, such as on the soft side, for example, developing e-mobility platform for the use of private cars electrically, and also all the enabling infrastructure for this electric vehicle to run on the road, just such as charging infrastructure. I'll give you an example. Hong Kong will be starting to develop and test a right-hand drive electric bus with a Chinese manufacturer, BYD. BYD is a company that Warren Buffett have invested into. This K9 bus by the BYD actually have been tested and operate successfully in China. Why we still need to further develop and test it in Hong Kong? One of the reasons is, of course, it changed from a left-hand drive to a right-hand drive. But the most important reason is that in Hong Kong, we like to help them to build in and install more safety facility and equipment inside the bus and outside the bus so that it is suitable to run in Hong Kong. For example, we will be installing a video camera at the back of the bus, so when the bus back up, the driver can see clearly what is behind him in a congested and tight environment in Hong Kong. So as you can see from this example, there are a lot of opportunities of smaller or medium-sized enterprise in UK that can help all these big Chinese manufacturer of electric vehicle of how to build or install the bus better or the electric vehicle better for the international market. Oops, sorry. Water is another area with many opportunities, especially for solutions in effluent reuse, like the planning, design, technology, equipment, installation, implementation, and operation. The treated effluent reuse facility in the Lok Ma Chau loop will be a small one by comparison, due to the smaller population in the Lok Ma Chau group. But in the neighboring new NDA, new development area, the effluent reuse facility is a much bigger one. And I can see that effluent reuse facility and equipment on the building level will be a very commonplace in southern China. So as you can see from this effluent reuse, big plant in NDA, smaller plant in the loop, and even smaller facility on a building level, offering opportunities to small, medium-sized enterprise in the UK. For waste management, which our permanent secretary, Mr. White, have also explained, there would be big project, on waste management. In Hong Kong and southern China, to deal with waste management, we also need large-scale and small-scale incineration facility and equipment for solid waste. How to turn all this energy produced from the waste into useful energy? And capturing the heat, for example, from sludge treatment and using it either in the plant itself or selling it back to the grid is an area that should be seriously looking into. And actually in Hong Kong, we are building the first sludge treatment facility from wastewater, and it will be in operation in 2013. This first sludge treatment facility had the capacity of treating 2,000 tons of sludge from wastewater per day. The Lok Ma Chau Loop development is just one of the many examples where the carbon agenda in China have provided additional business opportunities for service provider and solution provider in Hong Kong, in the Pearl River Delta, in China, and in Asia. Thank you.
I want to talk this afternoon about the new cultural district in Hong Kong, which has been the outcome of 3 competitions over the last 8 to 10 years. But the final competition, which we won back in March, is the one that's going forward. The previous ones were developer competitions. The final competition had a substantial budget provided by the government through the West Kowloon District Authority. And for those who don't know Hong Kong, this is an aerial view looking down onto Hong Kong, and you can see the site as the flat area of land sticking out from Kowloon and Canton Road right into the middle of Hong Kong Harbour, with spectacular views really almost all around. It's an incredible site. And it's about overall 40 hectares, and a challenge to create a new cultural district in Hong Kong. And the brief that we received from our client, I think, was a very good one, in that it was a very rich mix of different activities. Obviously, the cultural facilities themselves were the major built component, just over a third of the total accommodation. But in addition to that, there are offices, there's residential, hotel, very importantly, retail and dining and entertainment, together with education, and then also a requirement for a considerable area of public open space. And the sort of cultural buildings that are being looked at in the district are mainly for the performing arts. There's one exception to that, a major new museum, which will be larger than Tate Modern here in London. But this is the concert hall that we designed in Gateshead, the Sage, and concert hall is an important part of the brief. Also a new opera house. This is the opera house that we designed in Dallas. A variety of new other cultural buildings. Here you see Nîmes. And then also an arena for around 15,000 people. This is a building on a smaller scale that we did in Saint-Étienne, near Lyon in France. So it's a rich mix of cultural buildings. There are also quite a number of smaller venues. Having been in Hong Kong for over 30 years, we started with trying to understand the way in which Hong Kong so successfully works in terms of the mix of activities and the density and the way in which you get vertical arrangement of many different sorts of activities, from retail to restaurants to offices to residential, all together stacked vertically on top of each other. And we actually analysed, this is Nathan Road, not far from the site. We started by drawing the cross-section through that street, analysing the way in which the services were running below the street level, and from that looking at the dimensions that generated the success, the busy integrated life that takes place in Hong Kong. And from that one could also start to see the way in which in any street in Hong Kong, different parts of the street life, how much space visually they occupied. So this was the outcome of a lot of analysis of Hong Kong urban existence, which we felt was incredibly relevant if we were going to succeed with the new cultural district. And so we took that measured information, that analysis, and started by looking at recreating that as the main spine of the new cultural district, which we called the Avenue. And you can see here the beginning of that concept. And to that we added the vital ingredient of shade, because in Hong Kong it's hot, and if you're in the shade, it makes a very considerable difference. So down the middle of the avenue, there's an avenue of trees to provide shade, and on the left and right there are colonnades, so that as you walk along the street you're also protected from the sun. And then off that avenue are the many different kinds of facilities. There are the cultural buildings, the 17 cultural buildings that are entered directly off the street. Some of them have grand lobby spaces leading to the auditorium, others are more discreet. But a little like the West End of London nearby here, where many of the cultural buildings, many of the theatres here are sort of totally integrated and surrounded by shops, offices and residential, with obviously a few jewels like the National Gallery or the Royal Opera House. We took that as a sort of working model and overlaid that on to the DNA of Hong Kong, so that you can see here, related to the avenue, entrances into a major auditorium on the right-hand side, with shops and restaurants on the left-hand side. And then to enable this to become a pollution-free, traffic-free master plan, all the parking and all the servicing, and of course many of the venues require a lot of servicing, are placed below ground level in a two-storey undercroft, so that you remove all that pollution out of the main pedestrian circulation at ground level. And so if you look at a plan of this part of Kowloon, and the example that I was talking about, Nathan Road, is shown in red here, we, as it were, take that as our starting point to create the avenue that runs east-west on the site. But it's not just about a single route or a single street. Obviously, the success of Hong Kong is about the relationship between major streets and minor streets that often run at right angles. So again, we take that concept and apply it to the cultural district, so that we are blending the new cultural district in terms of its overall structure and form into the heart of Kowloon. And of course, the site is off Canton Road, which is a highly successful retail street running north-south. So this is an extension of the Canton Road. And this early perspective shows how we create the shade with the colonnade and the trees down the middle, with a rich mix of activities along that route. And you can see here in the aerial view how this all comes together. And by keeping the whole cultural district as a compact entity, it enables us to free up as much of the site as possible in order to create a new park for Hong Kong. so that around 23 hectares of open space are provided in addition to the cultural district itself. And the majority of that, 19 hectares, is at the tip of the peninsula, enjoying the view towards Hong Kong Island. And at the head of the peninsula is the new venue, the arena, with an exhibition centre directly underneath it. Again, a device where we maximise the amount of space by placing one activity on top of each other to minimise the footprint of the exhibition and the arena spaces. So all of this is aimed at maximising open space and creating dense interrelationships in true Hong Kong style in the urban area. And the site is served by a tram system that runs along the north edge of the site and serves the whole site. And the final element of this is protecting the site in its entirety from the tunnel mouth to the tunnel that links below the harbour to Hong Kong Island, and building a curved building, single aspect building, which is both hotel and residential, again enjoying the incredible views. And so the park is at the heart of our proposal, and again these early studies here show the nature of the park, and the idea is to bring the countryside, the Hong Kong countryside, into the heart of Hong Kong, to create a more relaxed, informal landscape, a more natural landscape. Many of the parks in Hong Kong are very formal and not very easy to use, and this is aimed to be something completely different. And within that park there will be an outdoor arena. So often in Hong Kong in the evenings the climate is very benign for outdoor performances, and again enjoying the view of Hong Kong Island beyond. And then along the waterfront there is a 2-kilometre pedestrian walk which links everything together from Canton Road right the way round to the arena, and onto that walk faces some of the more individual cultural buildings on the right hand of this view. And you can see here, looking back in the opposite direction towards the Canton Road, the potential for the major museum being the sort of emblematic building of the whole district. And central to the whole of this strategy, and again it very much relates to the speaker just now, is a strong sustainable agenda for the site. I won't go into this in too much detail, but water harvesting and recycling water as part of the irrigation for the park is one such element. Obviously very important in Hong Kong is to space the buildings in such a way that you encourage ventilation through the whole development to the area behind. So we've done a lot of studies on the massing of the new cultural district to encourage air percolation through the site. The whole idea of having a district energy system, as has already been touched upon, as a part of the whole sustainable strategy. And then, if this were possible to achieve, and again I think listening to the speaker just before me, I think it is possible, the idea that waste was recycled in an energy centre on the site that could recycle waste not only in the cultural district but from the surrounding area. And that would make a very sizable contribution to the sustainable agenda for the project. And that whole energy centre could be celebrated in the approach to the arena here as something that is visible and is something to be proud of as part of the strategy. I won't talk about all the 17 cultural venues, but all the red buildings shown on this diagram of the site indicate the spread of cultural buildings. Some, as I say, are freestanding, but the vast majority are fully integrated into the urban fabric of the district. And this was again an early sketch of showing how over time, and of course there will be a number of architects working on different buildings for the project, how the whole district could develop its own individual skyline as you approach by Star Ferry, and there will be a new Star Ferry on the peninsula as an integral part of the transport system. And so just to end on, this shows the aerial view looking from above, the same aerial view as we started with. And you can see the park in the front with the venue, the arena, with the exhibition centre on the left, the curved building separating the pollution of the tunnel mouth from the park, and then the cultural district stretching down and integrating with the rest of this part of Kowloon. Thank you very much.
My talk today is titled Heritage Conservation Opportunities in Hong Kong. And most of you will be familiar with the iconic ever-changing skyline of Hong Kong, and you would have seen a few of those today. And you would wonder, you'll probably never associate heritage conservation with Hong Kong. And you'll be right. I mean, it's a fair assumption. In the next 10 minutes or so, 10 to 15 minutes or so, I'm not trying to convince you otherwise, but what I'm going to do is use our experience of the last few years in Hong Kong as an example to illustrate the point that there are plenty of opportunities in Hong Kong. And like in our case, you'll probably find them in the most unlikely places. So, a little bit about ourselves. Purcell Militarism, we are an architectural company formed in 1947, and we've this is a photograph earlier this year when we had our summer outing. We currently employ 160 people over 11 offices in the UK and 1 office in Hong Kong. Our work across 10 different sectors ranging from hospitality to healthcare, places of worship, to workplaces. And cutting through all these sectors, what's actually distinguishes us from a lot of our competitors is the fact that we know a little bit about heritage projects. Our experience and our expertise in this area is illustrated by just a few projects, a stone's throw away from here. For example, we've worked on the Palace of Westminster, literally just a spitting distance from here. The British Museum has been a client of ours for over 20 years. This is an interior design project we did when the Terracotta Army came to the museum, and we've worked with Foster's, where we advised the client when the Foster's project on the Great Court. We've also worked on St. Paul's Cathedral for many years, and one of our partners is a surveyor of fabric for St. Paul's for many years too. And a slightly more recent heritage conservation project, which is the Athenaeum Hotel Tang in Piccadilly, which was completed recently. Without sounding too much like a tourist board for London, just like to, I hope this demonstrates that we do know one thing or two about working in the heritage sector. So what does that mean in Hong Kong? What about our story in Hong Kong? How can we take that to Hong Kong? Well, actually, our story started a long way away. Our story started, funny enough, in the Antarctica. Back in 2007, our chairman, Michael Morrison, gave a talk at the British Council in Hong Kong on a very interesting project he did, writing conservation management plan for Shackleton's hut and Scott's hut in the Antarctica. And that caught the imagination, or caught the attention. It came on the radar of our client, the Hong Kong Jockey Club, about the work that we do writing conservation management plans. And at that time, they were looking for somebody to write a conservation management plan for the old police station, Central Police Station and Victoria Prison project in Hong Kong. And we were duly invited to tender. We won. Work began in early 2008, and we completed the project and completed a report in 2008 in June. And what we were able to demonstrate was the fact that apart from, conservation is not a recent phenomenon. It's been around in Hong Kong for quite some time. And there are some expertise in Hong Kong, but what we were able to demonstrate is that with our experience in Hong Kong working with all these heritage buildings, that we've actually got practical experience rather than sort of the more academic or theoretical experience in this area. And that our commission continued, And but since 2009, we've had 2 people working full-time in Hong Kong. And in 2010, we formally established our office in Hong Kong in September that year. And we started with 4 people. And earlier this year, we also had in May, had a launch in the British Consulate in a building designed by Sir Terry Farrell. And as of yesterday, the office is now growing within a year to 13 people within our rather cramped office now. 50% of our staff was relocated from the UK, and 50% of our staff was employed in Hong Kong. Although we know we know a little bit about conservation, but there's nothing that beats sort of local knowledge. So it is our aim to at least achieve a 50-50 split in terms of local and relocated staff. And most of the people have been working on the Central Police Station project, which essentially is a conservation project of a compound that involves 16, if you like, listed buildings in UK terms, and the conversion of that into a multi-purpose arts complex. We're working together with Herzog de Meuron. You actually saw a glimpse of that project earlier in one of the slides. And they will be providing 2 new buildings, one purpose-built contemporary art gallery and an auditorium. And we're also working with the local executive architect, Rocco Design, on this project, who will be providing local support. Currently, we're at detailed design stage, and which is due to complete at the end of the year, and we're due to go on site in 2012 in the spring. And the completion of the project is expected to be in spring 2015 for this £100 million project. As you can see from this view and the view before, conservation does happen in Hong Kong and in the middle of the city as well. This actually, I would like to use a very interesting example to illustrate how small and medium-sized company could have contribution in this, in that we recently commissioned a paint sampling work done for this project, and we had to fly somebody out from the UK for half a day, halfway around the world, half a day, to do something that we just couldn't find expertise in Hong Kong. It's not bad for half a day's work. And these opportunities exist. But that's not all. The Central Police Station is part of a bigger initiative one of the initiatives by the Hong Kong government called Conserving Central. In it, there are 8 high-profile projects which are going to be, or in the process of being conserved. Central Police Stations being one of them. And we've also been lucky enough to have been involved in a couple others. We've written a historic and architectural appraisal for the central government offices. And when the new government offices, when all the government departments relocated to the new government offices, this will be vacated, and there will be opportunities for adaptive reuse for this building. And also the central market in Hong Kong, which is a very hotly contested competition. Again, Sir Terry Farrell's team has also been shortlisted as one of 4 for the revitalization of a very iconic 1930s market building in Hong Kong. Due to our exposure in this area, we are very lucky to be exposed to a number of government client bodies we've either been working with or directly commissioned to do work for them, who are very active in the area of conservation. In the private sector, we've done a number of conservation management plans. This one for 1930s villa called Jesfield, which is going to be turned into a clubhouse for a nearby high-rise residential development. And a couple more historic appraisals for buildings in the Peak. What's interesting about this is that there's a list called the 1444. The government has listed 1,400, just over 1,400 buildings, as you and I would know it as listed buildings in Hong Kong. And what we've come across is the fact that practical conservation is relatively new in Hong Kong. I mean, we've a lot of people who are very good at on the practical, on the theoretical side and on the academic side. But what we've come across is every case is almost like a test case. We almost have to start from first principle. So you can imagine with that 1444 buildings, there's a lot of work to do. So what about the mega projects? I mean, we've talked about these tend to be rather small-scale projects, but we've heard earlier about the West Kowloon Cultural District from Mr. de Grey, and we've also heard about the Kai Tak project from Mrs. Tang. Obviously, having a base in Hong Kong, we are in a perfect position to monitor any opportunity that arises. But what's also interesting about that is that in anticipation of these major projects, the surrounding areas are getting themselves ready for the inevitable gentrification of the area, the expected rise in property prices, and the expected rise in demand. So there is a lot of actually interesting projects that are springing around. For example, not just north of the Kai Tak Airport, we've just completed a feasibility study for a 24-story tower, residential tower in that area, which are springing up left, right, and centre even way before the Kai Tak Airport's been built, project's been completed. Also, linking the two projects is another opportunity. I think that there will be many opportunities for UK input. Is the Central Kowloon route. Essentially, it is a 3-lane underground traffic that links the east and the west of Kowloon. And we've been fortunate enough to be involved with another police station project for the revitalization of it, and also the cultural study as well as a social impact assessment of the area surrounding these two major projects, as I said, as it gets ready for its gentrification. Although in the UK, in Hong Kong, there isn't an easy a system like the OJU in Europe, but information is readily available on the internet, and if you casually browse through the government's internet, we have noticed 3 recent or upcoming tender that comes out. What caught our eyes are obviously the mention of graded historic buildings and declared monuments, but also what make these in common is a total facilities management. And so I've been told in this area there are many opportunities that comes up, particularly with working with existing building stock that the government owns in the next few years. So, there are, as you can demonstrate, there are plenty of these sort of opportunities around major projects. As if that's not enough to demonstrate that Hong Kong is serious about heritage conservation. There is an international conference that's to be held in Hong Kong at the end of the year, in December, organized by the Development Bureau in Hong Kong. And, heritage conservation has actually become a key component of urban regeneration in Hong Kong. And I think despite what you see, the changing skyline, there are still a lot of opportunities there. And fortunate for us, I've checked, last time I checked anyway, out of the 40 kind of UK competitors we have in Hong Kong, I can only see that another one of us have set up an office in Hong Kong. So the market, despite small, it's not saturated, and there are a lot of, as I said earlier, down to from some paint sampling to concrete repair, creative concrete adaptive reuse. There are plenty of opportunities for UK companies in Hong Kong. I started off with a photograph of our office of us in the UK. Here's a photograph of our office, our cramped office in Hong Kong. And the best advice I can give you to you is to travel out there to see it for yourself. And if you do, you're more than welcome to come up for a coffee and enjoy the view.
I first went to Hong Kong on a student scholarship. I was studying planning and housing in Japan, and I came back through Hong Kong, and I took this photograph, which you see at the top, in 1964, which is a very long time ago, before an awful lot of you were born, probably. But it is taken from the same view as the postcard underneath, which was taken just this year, or early this year. And it is an extraordinary phenomenon, the Hong Kong as a piece of city making. I think it's one that both the Hong Kong and the British ought to be extremely proud. There is an integration of development, of transportation, of housing, and of tremendous growth that has been enormously successful. But it is an extraordinary story, and that is our prime interest in architecture. Is it's linked to city planning and to urban planning, to urbanism. And so city making and cities are very much the theme, I'm going the wrong way, of what we have been doing and are doing. We've got an office we've got two main offices, one in London, one in Hong Kong, and they're about equal, about 50, 60 people at each. and I like the fact that we are balanced like that. It's a two-centred practice, and there's an interchange between the two. There's a feeding from the east to the west and vice versa. We have done a lot of transportation buildings. The earliest one is your bottom right, which was Embankment Place, Charing Cross, which was air rights, which led us to go to Hong Kong and do the Kowloon station, which I'll show in a moment. But we're also doing other work in the region. We did the Incheon Airport, which is part of the main airport for Seoul. We have also, we are currently doing the new Delhi station, and we've been advising the government and local authorities here on the older common interchange, so the feedback continues, as it were, 20 years later from the Embankment Place Charing Cross station. We are looking at the combination of Crossrail high speed for London. The major project that we began doing in Hong Kong, and it's one that we commissioned to do in 1991, but has been built out. It was planned to be completed in, I think, 2014, but it was finished this year, which is the Kowloon station and development, the relationship between a station that was a very large, complex station as part of the airport rail line, one of the 4 major stations. We got the one that I think is very suited to us. It's very three-dimensional, very complex, very urban. Not a station in the standalone sense. It was initially out in the water, and then the landfill took place. Part of that landfill now will become part of the cultural centre. And the development above it is in Imperial is about 14 million square feet. And we had to design a station so that development around it could take place incrementally, and each stage could be working in every sense, both as a piece of commercial real estate, but also in terms of access and function, and in means of fire escape and so on. And as it developed around it, not done by us, we did the station and the main core of the development, which was the shell for the shopping, and the square at the top. And then around it has been built by others, various developers, the new complex. This is a diagram that we did at the time we began the process. At the very top of this picture, you can see the peak, which is what took us to Hong Kong in 1991. So we've had an office there for 20 years, although, in fact, we set an embryonic office up in 81, 10 years earlier. So we've now been officially there for 20 years. And this is a view of that development. As I said, these are all by different architects, developers. But in the core, in the middle of this, is the West Kowloon station. And this is a view of the three-dimensionality of that station below ground. And you can see the various different lines, the shopping, and the large volumes, and how at ground level you just see the building that is an entry arch building, which has also the ventilation for what happens down below. And this square is the very heart of the new district, in which there is 14 million square feet, of which 3,000 or 4,000 apartments, the tallest building in Hong Kong, and various other buildings built in stages. But underneath it, like an iceberg, it has this complex that we designed and built, anticipating in its structure and its function and its services everything that was going to be built above it in an extraordinary Rubik cube. And it's a model really that I think is fascinating for all the developments that are now happening in China. And there's various lessons that Hong Kong can take to China in a very successful way, particularly the relationship between transportation and urban planning. The way that stations, unlike the very early stations in, that were coal-fired steam engines, where with a lot of industry around them, the modern station is a place that is the heart of a town, the heart of a city, just like the Kowloon station is you saw as the public square as its focus, but also you can get the public station, the major railway stations today, as grand halls, rather than in the tradition of the Grand Central in New York. And we won two of the main stations that are on the high-speed line. We won the Beijing station, which we completed in time for the Olympics, and we also won the competition for the Guangzhou station. The Beijing South Station is the largest station in China at the time it was built, although Guangzhou is larger. And it is, we are now doing the master plan, building around it. There it is in its size. It is a very considerable size of building. It's about 3 times the size of King's Cross, to give it a dimension. And it has a bus station, it has many other facilities around it, and gradually it is being enclosed and wrapped around by a new urban district. This is the high-speed train inside the platforms at the lower level, but at the top is the Grand Concourse, which is 300 meters long, which fills up particularly at Chinese New Year. It is a reflection of the sheer numbers of people and the population of China that these large halls, whether it's in airports or in railway stations or whatever, are part of the culture of urban city making. We also did the Guangzhou station, which is part of the Pearl River Delta complex of cities. You heard the very first speaker about Zhuhai, Macau, Shenzhen and Kowloon, but up at Guangzhou and other cities around it, there is now the high-speed line comes down there, and the development of this as a kind of a super city is not only, this is a diagram I did about 15 years ago, but I think many are now recognizing how this urbanization of a whole region is now becoming almost a super city. And I'll show you, first of all, our station in Guangzhou, very briefly. That is it with the plan around it of developing a new urban quarter. This is it as a from the air, and this is the main concourse. At the time, it was just being opened. Finally, a project which is not a station, but it's still part of, many of the lessons from Hong Kong have been about the density and the way tall buildings work in the tradition very much that New York established of high-rise in association with low-rise, Rockefeller Center being a classic and one of my favorites internationally. This is the tallest building realized by a UK architect. It's the 100-story, and it's I think the 8th tallest in the world. And it is a very slender tower. It is, and it's also not symmetrical bilaterally. In other words, it's thinner in one way than the other, and it has a directionality about it. And at the top, there is a very large atrium at the top, which goes through several stories because the top floors are a hotel. This is a section through the atrium at the top, and there's a large suspended pod, which is the reception at the 100th floor for the hotel. The lower part is offices, and it's part of a complex with shopping and residential. It's very much in the tradition of a new urban quarter. And then that is it, looking over Shenzhen. And just to return to my first slide of contrast, when I was there in 1964, I took this photograph from the border looking towards Shenzhen, which virtually didn't exist at the time. And so we have a personal history of making this contribution to change. And this is the 100-story tower now completed. And this tradition goes on in our firm. We're looking at with Hong Kong developers primarily involved, We just won a competition for various parts of this master plan complex for the new Beijing CBD, which will be built out during the coming years. So that's our view, that's our experience of London and Hong Kong and its relationship with China and the opportunities in the city making that's going on there. Thank you.
Right, I will continue on the theme of London, Hong Kong and China, and my talk will very much be about Hong Kong being a gateway to Asia for us as a company and for the opportunities that our being there creates for us. For this I have to go back to briefly introduce ourselves, who we are. Buro Happold is a multidisciplinary engineering firm that started as 8 partners of structural engineers, an offspring of Arup, as it were, in 1976. But then, had its reputation for specialist structures, as you can see them on the slide here. But then moved very quickly and expanded both geographically and in terms of the services that we provided. Moving from structural engineering to building services and all sorts of specialist engineering services in the built environment you can imagine. And the latest, as you can see here on the timeline, I've been in all over the UK and in the Middle East, is our offices in India and then in 2009 in Hong Kong. This is sort of reflected in the map of our projects, which is very much focused on the UK. It's not larger than China, it's just that we have more projects and I had to squeeze them in the sketch. Similarly, Saudi Arabia, where we have traditionally a long-standing client relationships and so on. But then you can see them coming up in East Asia, and that's very much the story of where we are now. You might recognize those who don't know us, some hopefully do. Our projects here, some of them are quite important. Battersea Power Station redevelopment, Olympic Stadium, or the British Museum, Spencer de Grey. One of our most successful projects. We have also, as I said, a wide-ranging number of international projects, of which you see a selection here. But we want to move on to Hong Kong. How did it start? Well, we had some projects in Hong Kong a long time ago, and this is the cultural center for which we provided structural engineering, but that was finished in 1988, so that's a while ago, and we had only a project office there. Similarly, we had projects in China, but only as one-offs. But then, having looked into setting up in Hong Kong seriously in the late 2000s, here we then, out of this effort, won the competition for the XRL West Kowloon Terminus building with Adas Architects, providing the structural engineering for the rather complex roof. This is the competition model. Yes, that's what it looks like. And it's not just what we're providing here, or what the project was about, the interesting diagrams and the fact that it actually works rather well, but it is the complex roof that brought us into the project and that made the project such a stunning piece in that particular area as the terminus of the high-speed rail link which we've been introduced to. And our expertise here is our long-standing experience in complex structures that allowed us to optimize things, reduce the amount of material used, and nonetheless creating the rather spectacular spaces of this terminal building. This is a picture we've already seen. To the south of it, we will have Foster & Partners master plan of the Kowloon Cultural District, so it comes together. This is the view out onto Hong Kong Island from there. But as I said, this project, winning this rather important competition, which is one of those mega projects in Hong Kong, allowed us to set up a Hong Kong office for Sirius as a startup, being an offspring of our London office, because for various reasons. So why set up in Hong Kong? Not in anywhere else. We looked at China. We had our ideas to move into the market there. Well, Hong Kong is the most buzzing and spectacular place to be, but that's not enough. We knew that the Asian economies are growing, and here you have, rather faint, I suppose, the growing per capita GDP of various countries there, predominantly China, yeah. But there's other factors, and it comes back a little bit to the sessions this morning. Yeah, it is rather easy to set up in Hong Kong. Yeah, somebody said it's easier than setting up in the UK. The legal system is very favourable, and the language, obviously, English gets you around. You have a pool of trained and skilled people which you can tap into, and that's quite important to actually create the mix that's necessary to have not just English well, I'm not English, but Europeans that go out and but get the mix of the local and those brought in. It's got fantastic connections to all of Asia, and therefore basically the world comes together in Hong Kong. So we set up an office. It is, as I said, an offspring of of our London office. It's led by two of my partners, Stephen Brown and Matthew Smith, who went there on the back of that competition, but then gathered around themselves a team which was broadening the skills and really reflecting the multidisciplinary offer that we, as Buro Happold, have established in all other parts of the world over time. And you can see here that some of the faces are distinctly Western and European, and others are distinctly Chinese. That's the mix I was talking about. But we have also brought in people that have long-standing experience in China, working in mainland China and in Hong Kong. And that allowed us then to connect Hong Kong back into the world with all the different design hubs, which are so important to us, because many of our clients are actually architects who we collaborate with, who we like working with, and who I hope like working with us, because we bring that creativity of British engineering to their projects. And from there, you see the yellow dots on the slide. We've also been able to expand our project portfolio from XRL terminus in Kowloon to a vast-ranging number of other projects. Again, on the back of our multidisciplinary offer, as I said. Yeah, sustainability is the driving underlying factor. It is about the bringing together not just the environmental aspects of it, we hear so often, but also the social and economic aspects of sustainability, but that's probably the theme of another talk, I would think. Yeah, here's the list of the services we provide, and I'm not going to go through them, but yeah, it's quite extensive. So out of this, we developed a portfolio of projects in China, moving on with another mega infrastructure project. Yes, we heard about this, the cruise terminal, for which we provided structural engineering. Again, that's under construction now. Yeah, so another big project of this kind, which then helped us move on further. As I said, we are internationally quite well connected. We have an office in Warsaw, we have an office in Berlin, and now being established in China, having our links to China, we had the possibility to also work on very bespoke and very unique projects like those two pavilions I'm showing you here for the Shanghai Expo, and that helped us really establish ourselves in mainland China further. Moving from there on, yeah, projects of all ranges of sizes. Yeah, master planning projects here in Western China, all the way to right in front of our doorstep. This is interesting because it is really to do a lot with cleaning up those two rivers. I hope this works. No, it doesn't work. Yeah, fantastic. More projects. Yeah, the two rivers you see on which are heavily polluted. Our scheme is all about cleaning those up and making them part of the local environment and making them a livable environment. Very much linking back into the themes we've heard by other speakers earlier today. More other projects really expanding now into further into mainland China, with particularly high-rise projects, again feeding off our expertise in facade engineering and our expertise in high-rise. Yeah, as I said, it's not just China; it's also other parts of Asia, Vietnam, master planning work, and similar themes, and also the Philippines. Yeah, working on this project with Populous, who we've done quite a number of quite important stadia with, Arsenal, or it's Emirates Stadium, I should say, and the Olympic Stadium. What does that mean for me? Because actually, I'm not in Hong Kong. I'm in London. I'm based in London. I'm leading the structural engineering team here in our London office. I have a team of 70 strong structural engineers. And what does that mean for me? Yeah, so I have been able to also link back into this network with my partners, multidisciplinary engineering services here in Buro Happold in London. And that's been fantastically interesting, because on the back of having someone sitting in Hong Kong who knows the local market but also knows the connection to mainland China, we've been able to participate increasingly in an increasing number of international competitions and be successful in these competitions, and also then move into mainland China with our projects. Yeah, I reel them off a little bit so that you get an impression of what this is. Very similar again. It's mainly high-rise and cultural projects, state-funded most of the times. Yeah, this one, the Hainan International Trade Plaza, which we didn't win, but that gets quite a lot of work gets put into these competitions. Again, bringing together our expertise in structural engineering and our expertise in environmental engineering to have a credible scheme, because the first hurdle will be that this goes to the local engineer. He will check whether you actually fulfill the requirements, and that we don't want to fall at that hurdle. Yeah. Another project of this year, which is still not decided, it's the Changsha Opera House with Zaha Hadid. The first one was also with Zaha Hadid. I should have mentioned that it was written on the top. Yeah, a lot of these are with Zaha Hadid. They are we are having a lot of work with them at present in mainland China. Similar theme. We try to be, we enable the building shape to be built economically, but at the same time we link it into an environmental scheme that brings together the sustainability aspects and intelligent building service engineering. Slightly off now here is this project, because I say off because it's not a London project. The architects are based in Genoa, but it comes to our connection in mainland Europe, yeah, which is all to do with this network I was talking about, which also enabled us to work with architects in Poland and in Berlin or in Germany for those pavilions. Yeah, that's just been submitted, so we will see what comes out of it, but it's a similar story. And then the last two we are about to sign contracts for. We're on the verge of winning. The Jiangsu Grand Theatre was a project, a competition submitted in 2010. So it's been a long time in the making. A beautiful project, I feel, which blends extremely nicely into the landscape around the lakes of Nanjing. And the interesting thing here was, while we were doing the competition, not long ago, we were asked in front of a committee of Chinese engineers who wanted to know how it all works, yeah, and that was a very interesting experience. Apparently, we passed this test, so our presentation there has allowed this project to move on. But again, it's not just about the structure and the shells that form the envelope to these operas and opera houses and theatres and so on, but it's the integration of the engineering parts with the architect and the individual engineering disciplines. And the last one, and I hear from Zahas that we have virtually signed the contracts for this, is the Nanjing Youth Olympic Center. It was again an international competition, and for a couple of towers and a conference center, we followed this with engineering schemes that backed up the designs by Zahas. It went through various different iterations, both again on all sides of our engineering disciplines, and as I say, it went through various iterations from one tall tower to twin tower solution. And what you see on the right-hand side is a screenshot of work in progress. So we are working on the project. An interesting factor here is that where we are used to, say, in the Middle East, to have our own office and work, all through all stages of the project. Similarly in Hong Kong, where we have our own delivery office and we're doing the detailed design for projects like XRL terminus station, the terminus building. In mainland China, it's slightly different because we have to work with a local design institute, at least in our case. And that means we have to structure our work, our input, in a way that we add most value and then hand it over in the best possible fashion to the LDIs. And it's interesting because along the way, we have actually established the working relationship with the various rather large LDIs. Yeah, I mean, they are all much larger than any one of us. And in terms of architectural services or engineering services, and that's been a good learning curve over the past few years. Yeah, what's the future outlook? Having started this office in 2009 and now grown in Hong Kong to 45, I think it is, we're seeing this very much as a reverse in the future. Yeah, we spread out into Hong Kong from the various design hubs. Hong Kong itself is a design hub. It's a center of design and creativity in Asia, and we see the arrow turning around and actually, being inspired by Hong Kong, and Hong Kong spreading out into other parts of Southeast Asia and Asia. That's part of it. The other part is obviously a more serious move into mainland China. We are in the process of setting up an office in Beijing. We're virtually there, but not quite yet. But it's all the paperwork, so I understand this has been signed, and we're looking to further opportunities. Maybe it's Beijing New Airport. We're working with Zaha Hadid as one of the shortlisted teams. I think Spencer, your team is also shortlisted. Yeah. We will see, but it's a bright future. We're very excited about it. Thank you.